This is an ode to music. This song is in German, so I'm gonna read the poem in English for you. O sacred art, how oft in hours blighted, while into life's untamed cycle hurled, hast thou my heart to warm love reignited, to transport me into a better world. How often hath the sigh from thy harp drifted, a holy chord from thee, full of bliss, a glimpse of better times from heaven lifted. O sacred art, my thanks to thee for this.
Thank you for that beautiful music. Today, the theme for our service is for the beauty of the earth. The land is sacred all the time and in every place. As part of our hospitality, I'd like to have all of our members look around, and if there are visitors who don't have a gray hymnal and a teal hymnal, if you could kindly provide that, that would be a lovely outreach. And now here is our welcome to you. Come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter your gender, whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome here whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes. You are welcome here. No matter what you've experienced in the past, no matter what awaits you in the future, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, or some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. This is a community of open minds, loving hearts, and willing hands. You are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. I wish you a very good morning. My name is Ann Scarborough, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Welcome to all gathered here with us in the sanctuary and those at home in our virtual audience. Our worship team today consists of Reverend Laura as our worship leader, Bob Spicer and myself as worship associates. Rob Carlson will be giving us our Time for All Ages, and our musicians John Allen and Ricklin Nobies. And then our sound and streaming pros are Bob Scarborough and Maureen Davies. As we are emerging from this time of pandemic, let us do so gently and with compassion for all gathered here. Be thoughtful in approaching others for greetings. We are all in different places and contexts, so it is best to ask before shaking hands, hugging, and getting close to speak. We invite you to sing as you wish during today's service. We would like to extend an especially warm welcome to those who are here for the first time. So glad you are here. If you'd like to get us to know us more, we encourage you to fill out the connection card in your virtual order of service or visit our welcome table following worship today. If you missed the QR code at the front, you can also find one inside the hardback hymnals. So those are the gray hymnals in the back. Please join us after the service today for coffee, tea, and a snack downstairs in our social hall. We have a religious exploration program for children and youth that meets weekly on Sundays during worship, and our director, Rob Carlson, is happy to answer any questions you have after worship. There is a lot happening here at South Valley, and the Happenings Weekly newsletter is your best way to stay up to date. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already via the link in the virtual order of service. And we have a couple of brief announcements to share. This afternoon, you are all invited on a congregation field trip to the Great Salt Lake. We will gather at 2:30 this afternoon at the Great Salt Lake Park near Salt Air for a brief public worship with poetry, song, and lamentation, followed by an opportunity to participate in ritual, walking, meditation, education, and art activities for all ages as a community. Meet in our parking lot here at 1:30 to carpool if you wish. Parking will be $5 per car, cash preferred. Don't forget to bring your reusable water bottle, a snack, sunscreen, or hat, shoes that can get muddy, and most importantly, your full and open heart for the beauty of this sacred sanctuary in our midst. Let us take a moment now to fully arrive and welcome one another with joy.
Stand up and talk to each other. Okay, just start playing.
Just start playing. We're gonna sing 1068 in the Teal hymn book, Rising Green. Stay standing while we light our chalice.
Let us light our chalice. We invite you to stand in body, mind, or spirit as we say our chalice lighting words, and use our actions if you want. Those at home are invited to light a chalice and share in this ritual by entering "Chalice is lit in the name of your street" in the chat box on YouTube. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action. As we gather this morning, we do so on the ancestral and current homelands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Gashute, and Ute tribes. As Unitarian Universalists, we acknowledge the complex and violent history that resulted in the stealing of these lands and the cultural and physical genocide perpetrated against its peoples at the hands and policies of white colonial settlers. We commit ourselves to undoing these harms, and we seek to authentically and with honesty engage in the necessary work that will produce justice for those disenfranchised and that promotes healing for the whole of the earth and for its peoples.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Laura Young, and it is So good to see all of you gathered here, especially the plethora of young people in this room. And that means anyone under the age of 100. But I especially notice those who maybe are also under the age of like 11 or 12. So welcome. In a moment, we'll invite you to come forward, those young and young at heart. In a moment, just a second, you'll come forward and then we'll have a story for you, and then you can choose to go downstairs for activities. As we gather this morning, let's fully arrive by breathing in and out and all around. And I will let my sound people know I'm going to unmute my other mic so that they can unmute this mic. There we go. Okay. Let us just breathe and settle our feet on the ground. This is a special day. In the Christian calendar, it is Palm Sunday. It is also this month the celebration of Ramadan and Passover. You are welcome to walk around. That is totally fine. But just don't take any rocks until it's time. This is a very special time of year in the calendar. The trees are blooming and spring has sprung. And we will have a chorus of praise ringing out from the sanctuary. This afternoon, as we gather over at the Great Salt Lake, we will have Nan Seymour with us to read her poetry. And I am going to read some of her poetry that she has written already relating to the Great Salt Lake. This poem is called Irreplaceable. And it is a chorus of praise swelling with love for our Great Salt Lake. It is a very long poem, which I will not read the whole of, because it is something like 1,706 lines. Invocation by Nan Seymour. When praise began to flow, we watched the water rise along both sides of the causeway. 11 islands recovered their autonomy. Microbialities sighed with relief. When praise began to flow, the dust subsided, metals resettled on the seafloor, arsenic and mercury were lulled back to sleep, blanketed once more by the great weight of water. When praise began to flow, 3 rivers rushed forward unhindered as greed relinquished its grasp, and fat flakes of snow tumbled into the great body, becoming clouds, drifting into peaks, making snow and more snow, and then creeks, then rivers, then lake effect, also known as sustenance, also known as snow. And the waters did not desert us when praise began to flow. When praise began to flow, we returned to 4th grade field trips, to picnics run amok, spirited floats and salt-encrusted bodies, boats bobbed back to their docks. We recalled how to sail. We could taste our first kiss. We remembered a day we didn't die. When praise began to flow, we gathered and told those stories, and a culture of disdain released its chokehold. Our eyes shone with love and even reverence, which began to grow when praise began to flow. We sorrowed over the way we shunned her irreplaceable body and vowed never again to part from her company, and the love we felt for each drop making a way to her whale heart became unfathomable. When praise began to flow, we thirsted, we learned, we observed, we drew love beyond naming. When praise began to flow, we began to know we had never been separate and thus could not be parted. When praise began to flow. Let us worship. I'm going to invite the children to come forward now as Rob comes to tell his story. Come on up. And if you're young of heart and you also want to sit on the floor, you can do that too.
Yes. Thank you. Good morning, church. As Reverend Laura said, it is so good to be together this morning, and as always, I am just so delighted by the presence of all of our young people this morning. And we are reminded that every giggle, every wiggle, every laugh, every cry, every clatter of a clipboard that hits the ground, these are all signs that our congregation is vibrant and growing. It's good to be with you this morning. A few moments ago, we heard Bob share our land acknowledgement. And the reason why we shared this land acknowledgement at the beginning of our worship together is for many important reasons. A couple of them. One is to remind us that before any of us were here, before this church was here, before this city was here, long, long before, the Native Americans were on this land. And we remember that now that we are here, it is our responsibility to, both on our own and in partnership with the Native Americans, care for the land, to care for this beautiful place where we can have our church building and our city. The Native Americans know well about caring for the land. And so I'd like to share with you a creation story, a story about how the world was created that comes from one of the native tribes from this area, and those are the Utes. So here's a creation story. In the beginning, there was nothing but the blue sky, clouds, sunshine, and rain. No mountains, no plains, no forest, no desert. No people either. The Manitou, or great he-she spirit, lived alone in the middle of the sky and was the ruler of all that was. There were no other powers or gods. They were alone. After a while, the he-she spirit became lonesome and wanted something new. They got tired of telling the sun to shine, the wind to blow, and the rain to fall. So they made a big stone drill. Try and picture that, a big stone drill. And made a big hole through the heavens and kept on making it bigger and bigger and bigger until they could look down onto the nothingness that was below. They were pleased with their work. When the hole was as big as they wanted it, they took snow and rain and poured it through the hole into the void below. And then the he-she spirit took the dirt and stones that came out of the hole in the floor of heaven and poured them through. After they had poured all of these things for a long time, they looked through the hole and saw a big mountain that they had made. And all around the mountain there were other mountains, and to the east a great plain. After looking at the top of the mountain, the he-she spirit thought that they would like to see more. So they made the hole bigger and crawled through it and stepped down to the top of the mountain. When they finally got down, they found that all of the stones, the dirt, the snow, and the rain had formed a huge thing that was kind of ugly and bald. And that did not look very nice. So they touched the earth with their fingers, and there the trees and the forests appeared. They swept their flat hands over the plains, and there were grass and small plants. Then they told the sun to shine through the hole in the sky, and as the snow melted, it made lakes and rivers and streams. These flowed east and west, and afterward went into great holes that formed the sky-blue waters, the oceans. They stole their colors from the sky, which accounts for their name. It was all very pretty. And every day the gentle rain fell and the earth blossomed. The he-she spirit came down every day from heaven and enjoyed these great creations. At that time there were no animals or people, only trees, grass, and water. After a while, they got tired and wanted yet something else. When the he-she spirit came down from heaven, they always carried their magic cane. And as they sat and pondered, they broke off a small end of the cane. Out of this, they made fishes, big ones and little ones of all sizes and shapes, and then they stroked them with their hands and breathed on them, and they came alive. So they looked around to see what they would do with them, and finally they put them in a stream and they swam away. And that's how we have fishes in the streams now. We don't know now who are real fish and who also might be the spirits of our ancestors. Then the he-she spirit went to the forests and found lots of leaves that were on the ground and had beautiful colors. These they took into their hands and, making some magic, blew on them, and they grew wings and feathers and became birds. From the oak leaves they made eagles, ravens, and hawks. From the red sumac, the redbird, and from the green aspen leaves, the blue jay. Each leaf made its own kind of bird, and all of the birds sang beautiful songs. We're starting to hear some of those beautiful songs now that it's spring from our birds, aren't we? From the middle of this magic cane, the he-she spirit made the antelope, buffalo, rabbits, squirrels, coyote, and all of the other animals. They lived together in peace for a long time until the coyote caused a lot of mischief, and then they began to argue and fight. The strong ganged up on the weak, and soon there was lots of unsettled creation. The he-she spirit looked on this and was sad. After a while, they decided that they would make one big captain or wise animal who was to be the chief and watch over the rest of the animals with wisdom and strength. So they made the great grizzly bear. To the grizzly bear, he gave all wisdom and power to govern the world, and that's why the grizzly is such a wise old man today. He's the big chief of all of the animals, according to the Utes. The he-she spirit also explained to the animals that they must stop fighting and live at peace, as those were the orders. And if they did not, they would be sad too. Most of them obey, excepting when the coyote makes a little mischief, and sometimes a little mischief might be okay. Then the he-she spirit went back into the heavens to rest a while and left the bear to rule for him. I really think that this story is such a wonderful reminder of how connected we are to the creation that's all around us and how important it is for us to continue to do what we can to take care of our world. And I hope, if you have the chance, that you'll join us this afternoon when we'll be taking a field trip out to the Great Salt Lake to celebrate our beautiful world. So at this time, if there are any of you who would like to join Grace and I downstairs for some activities, we will head down that way.
It's so fun to hear the joyous voices of the children. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Ann Scarborough, and I hail from the land of 10,000 lakes. Actually, Minnesota has over 15,000 lakes, but we didn't want to brag, so 10,000. So 10,000 is the tagline on our license plates. When I moved here to Utah, I felt stunned by the beauty of the snow-capped peaks of the Wasatch Mountains. With my Christian background, I found it utterly natural to pray the Psalms when I gazed on those heights. I looked to the hills from whence my help comes, from Psalm 121, always spontaneously appeared in my thoughts. Then, as I began learning more about the ecology of Utah and how the mountains provide all the drinking water in our reservoirs, my appreciation for water grew and grew. I came from a land rich in water resources to one that needs to conserve its waters. It has had an impact on me. Reverend Laura asked Bob Spicer and me to share with you today our personal development of ecological consciousness. I hope that as we share our experiences, it will trigger a thoughtful process of your own, reflecting on when you first became of Mother Nature and your dependence on her, who has influenced your ideas and perhaps inspired your activism, and what intentions you carry inside you in terms of how you are choosing to respond to the environmental crisis we humans are facing. What must we do as individuals, and what can we do together? Ecological consciousness requires a deep respect for the natural world and its patterns of relationships between living things and their environment. It challenges me to examine my conscience to make sure that I am doing my part to honor, protect, and sustain the world we all live in. So how have my ecological ethics evolved? I was very fortunate to be born into a farming family. We lived in south central Minnesota in an area referred to as the breadbasket of the world. My paternal grandfather, a German immigrant, purchased that farm in the late 1800s. My father continued caring for it, then my brother, and now my nephew and his wife carry on that tradition. Every kid understands their childhood experiences as normal, so I didn't recognize until later that it was like living in the Garden of Eden. And one side note, years later when my brother was on the farm, he unearthed some pottery shards as he was working the fields. And anthropologists have determined that our farm is situated on the site of an ancient Indian tribe called the Woodland Indians, who lived 4,000 years ago. And as I and my siblings grew up on that farm, wading in the creek, we would find arrowheads along the banks of the creek, and we could feel the spirits there, and we felt like we were guardians, that we needed to protect that land. My parents valued hard work, and they read the weather like meteorologists because their livelihood depended on it. Of course, my father focused his attention on the tillable acreage and on tending the animals he sold for income. But my mother took me into the woods to seek out the spring wildflowers and to identify the trees by their leaves and bark. She whistled to the songbirds, luring them closer so that we could observe their color and behavior. My mother also created a rich reading environment, so despite living far from county and school libraries, we had our own. We were surrounded by books. She subscribed to 4 newspapers and dozens of periodicals. As the caboose of the family, stranded far from friends in town, I read voraciously. One publication really opened my eyes to what was happening in our nation in the 60s and 70s in terms of our fossil fuel dependency and what the long-term consequences of that would be. The biologists, conservationists, that was the publication of the National Wildlife Federation. And the biologists, conservationists, educators, and futurists who authored their articles informed my head, my heart, and my soul. I followed politics and followed Senator Gaylord Nelson from Wisconsin, became a hero of mine, especially after he sponsored the first Earth Day on April 22nd, 1970, the spring that I turned 16. When I was 17, I read Dr. Paul Ehrlich's book, The Population Bomb. Now, in hindsight, we can see that many of his concerns, like imminent worldwide famine, did not manifest thanks to the Green Revolution in agriculture. But for me, it started me thinking about the carrying capacity of this planet. Too many people with too little resources would end disastrously. I made a pivotal decision at the age of 18 that has impacted many people. I decided that I did not want to contribute to overpopulation and that I would choose adoption to build my family. 2 years later, when I applied to the University of Montana to major in forestry, I was accepted into a special program called the Round River Experiment. The name was taken from a Sand County Almanac, the seminal work of the father of forestry, Aldo Leopold. This program was an experiment in alternative education, and we spent the majority of our time off campus, backpacking in Glacier National Park and other national forests. This was where I learned the wilderness ethic of always leaving a place as you find it. free of refuse, trampling, or any other sign of degradation. The very purpose of the Round River experiment was to develop this deep ecology, to understand our human selves as part of this natural world, to honor how it supports us, and to ask how we can help to sustain this beautiful world. The following summer, I transferred to the University of Minnesota, where I met my husband, Bob. Bob happens to be in the sound booth today, so turn around and give him a wave. He also was a forestry major, and I entered a new chapter in my life. Long story short, I told him of my commitment to adopt children. If he couldn't share that same level of commitment, I said it would be a deal breaker for our relationship. Living up to that personal and shared commitment with Bob has been the most gratifying act of my life, and probably always will be because of its impact on our families. We have integrated our family racially and invited some wonderfully diverse souls into our circle, strengthening our family tree for generations. But for the last 5 decades of my life, I have experienced deep frustration as I've observed how little political will there is to challenge our American dependency on fossil fuels. The ethics I gained in my youth opened my eyes, but these ethics haven't captured enough hearts in America to head off the climate crisis we find ourselves in. It is difficult for some to accept new ways of living sustainably. To many, these feel like sacrifices that they don't want to make, or don't understand why these changes are important to our own health and survival. I and others wonder why more people aren't doing the simple things like using recyclable bags, trading in their gas-guzzling vehicles, or changing their lifestyles to reduce waste, consumption, and greed. I'm certainly not perfect, but these efforts are always challenging me to live more sustainably and to walk lightly upon this earth. In conclusion, I'd like to share with you some opportunities that are available for you right here at South Valley. Number 1, we will be screening the film Youth versus Gov that details the efforts of young people and how they are confronting the powers that be, making their voices heard. Number 2, Climate Reality, Al Gore's nonprofit, is offering free climate leadership training in Las Vegas, June 11th through 13th. I've spoken with Reverend Laura, and if we have a group of people who are interested, there will be money available for transportation and hopefully lodging as well. We already have one person registered, so you won't be alone. Our Social Action Council is losing 2 key people this year, so we are looking for members who have a passion for social justice issues, for building a sustainable future, or for compassionate service. Please talk to me after the service if you have interest in any of these opportunities. We are all interconnected, and together we can work for good. With gratitude, may it be so.
This community, our church, and its many ministries are only made possible by the gifts you give of your time, your talent, and your treasure. Many of you pledge monthly to support our work, and for this, we're grateful. Your gifts help to ensure that we're able to live our values of love and justice in the world outside. Part of our ministry at Salt Lake includes sharing our Sunday worship offerings with a charitable organization that aligns with our principles and values. Please join me in reading our offertory words. They are printed in your order of service. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together, we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts. We will now accept the offering. For those at home, you're invited to use the giving link in the online order of service. I invite the ushers to come forward at this time.
for all that we have received and all we have found the courage to give. May we be truly grateful. May these gifts be a blessing on South Valley and our friends of the Great Salt Lake. All gathered here today are invited to participate in our ritual of joys and sorrows. Those who are joining us in the virtual community are invited to share their joys and sorrows in the Zoom chat box with one another. For those that are gathered here in body, you're invited to approach the altar and place a stone in the water. Feel free to pause as you select and place your stone, imbuing it with whatever is on your heart, be it something that lightens it with joy or something that causes you to feel some sorrow. You're invited to practice this ritual in silence. At the close of the ritual, I will add a final stone for those in our virtual community, as well as for those who are not yet expressing what is on their heart. We hold all in kindness. Those gathered here in body may now begin to approach the altar. For those in our online community, we hold you in our hearts until we can all gather again in person. For Bucha and all the people of Ukraine who are suffering, and for the Russian soldiers who, misled by their government, believe they are doing something good, but instead are engaged in terrible violence. Amen.
My name is Bob Spicer. Any pronouns will be fine. I grew up in an activist family, and I've been active for social justice, peace, disarmament, and the environment, I think, most of my waking life. It's been an unending, ongoing process. Yeah, it's been an unending, ongoing process of opening. And I don't really know how to place where I am just at this moment, because I'm listening and watching and preparing to learn. Let's continue thinking about the Great Salt Lake. As they said at Standing Rock, water is life. Our living watershed, in large part, determines who we are. It's nothing that we own. It's us. It's us. And it can drill through rock. Start high, the mountain snowpack, high ground that the first peoples here found sacred. Sources, springs, the alpine meadows, deep soil underneath the cliffs. What would we be without such places and such life? First snowmelt, firs and aspens, underground currents joining into streams, then rivers to the lake. As the poets said, it's in our bodies, and each one of us, in turn, is part of it. But let's be clear, the whole system is in danger. Warming weather, bigger storms, less snow, extending drought, less flow, more fire, less lake, less life. Less life. The lake dries, gets smaller, and the toxins blow. The lake is on the edge, and so are we. If we keep on going in the same direction, we will end up where we're headed. Instead, we'll need to think and act. Last summer's fires put us all downwind again. For a whole week. During wildfires further west, the Salt Lake Valley had the worst air in the world. Worse than Jakarta, worse than Beijing. I remember stepping out of the front door one afternoon and choking on polluted air. On the one hand, less snowpack and a shrinking lake. On the other hand, wildfires and drought brought on by climate change. We need to live by truth. There's not much time. Right here, we need to help protect the lake. And in a bigger ecosystem, the whole world, we need to free ourselves from fossil fuel. And we need to do it fast. Let's think about that water. Lao Tzu in China, over 2,000 years ago, wrote this: "What enables the rivers and seas to rule the 100 valleys is that they're good at getting below them. That's how they're able to rule the 100 valleys." It's a metaphor for leadership. And he continues, "Hence, sages who want to rise above the people must place themselves below the people in what they say and wanting to lead the people must place their own persons behind. And he goes on, since they ascend without contending, the world can never contend with them. Let's think back to the poem we heard earlier. It wasn't just about the water and the birds. When praise began to flow, we felt the genesis of our feathers. We felt water return to the sea of ourselves. We felt a swell in the lake of ourselves. We felt the surge of our rivers. We felt tidal. We felt primal. We fell with the snow. We grew ocean-hearted. We began to know we had never been separate, and thus could not be parted when the praise began to flow. In blunt words, it's us, the whole ecosystem, the amazing web of life, both in us and around us. And we need to speak the truth that we embody. The truth that we embody. Live that truth and find our active and productive parts within the flow of change.
In February, I attended a week-long seminar with Union theological professor and ordained Presbyterian minister Claudio Carvajal entitled Mourning the Earth, Rituals for Creating Joy and Change and Healing in a Time of Climate Change. And that first day, I recall very strongly that Dr. Carvajal asked us to watch several videos about the devastation of the planet, the acidification of the oceans and polar bears starving, and the trash gyre in the Pacific Ocean, the size of Texas. And I was so resistant at first. The grief was so strong in my chest, I didn't know if I could bear it. But I decided to trust my professor, so I watched those videos, and it was as difficult as I feared. His instruction to us was to observe our emotional response to the video and then share with our cohort afterwards. And our responses were as you would expect: sadness, grief, overwhelm, feelings of powerlessness, and deep rage. Dr. Carvajal did not tie those feelings up for us by the end of that day, and instead advised us to be gentle with ourselves overnight. And this instruction is what I would offer to you this morning. Be gentle with yourself in the midst of the difficulty of climate change. Over the course of that week, our cohort did arrive to a new place by following that instruction. And by the end of the week, where there had previously been overwhelm and despair and hopelessness, there was a newfound sense of empowerment, courage, determination. According to authors Elizabeth Roberts and Elias Amidian in their book Earth Prayers, this sense of recognition and of resonance with nature, this stirring of the self in response and in communion with nature, a desire to protect and advocate, is referred to as the ecological self. That ecological self is grounded in the intuition of the oneness of life and the deep interdependency that we share. This is, of course, a direct call to our seventh principle, which calls us to remember the interdependent web of which we are all a part. Roberts and Amida posit that when we, quote, ground our spiritual awareness in this ecological context, then the strength and the wisdom of the living earth flows with and through us. Our earth prayer becomes a mean of acting upon ourselves, unquote. This seems a far more productive place to arise from in the face of the tremendous challenges we daily hear about in the climate change reports. We know we need nature for certain, but have you remembered that nature needs you? That nature needs you also. Nature needs us right now and more every day to show up and give voice to that which is unable to self-advocate. Our Great Salt Lake, home to many thousands of creatures and critical to our human well-being, is a place where we, as residents of this beautiful valley, can make a difference. Our planned sojourn to the Great Salt Lake this afternoon was born from those conversations that were begun in February. And today I invite you to join me in expanding that conversation and opening your heart also to hold all of climate change, the fear as well as the possibility that we are not done yet. And let's begin right here in our very own sanctuary. I invite you to take a moment and look around this sanctuary. All of the materials used to build this place came from other places. Many, many trees gave of their lives to create the structure and the beautiful ceiling of our sanctuary. Have you thanked them recently? The glass in our windows, the fibers of the carpet, the metal and the concrete blocks, each of these have original sources in the earth. Surely some are more removed than others, but all were still arising from this land. And this building too, it rests on land that existed before this building and will continue to exist far beyond the life of this structure, but hopefully not beyond the life of this congregation. Have you thanked this land for giving us permission to build upon it? And the trees and the shrubs and the flowers that make up the landscape surrounding our building, have you noticed them of late? Have you thanked them for the shade and the beauty they provide to us and the shelter they give to the birds, the mice, the squirrels, and the insects that we share this place with? And what if you did not just stop with this land, but you extended it to the land underneath your own home, the road you take to work or school or the grocery store each week? What might this kind of radical inclusion of the land bring about in you and me and in us as a collective community? It's such a simple formula. It doesn't take any special skills or training or advanced degrees or education to participate. All you need to do is slow down and notice the ground beneath your feet. This afternoon, we sojourn out to the Great Salt Lake, and I would like to invite you to imagine it as a prophetic journey. Every prophetic tradition contains stories of prophets and communities and spiritual leaders spending time in the wilderness, either as part of an initial call or as a retrenchment of their ongoing practice. Moses, Elijah, the Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, all of them spend time in the wilderness. And it is there, outside the confines of home and community, that they meet the God of their understanding and receive their call to action. We too are being called in this time and this place to a sacred service. And our service begins by reconnecting to the earth upon which we all too often just lightly travel. The earth is calling us to use our voice in service of the whole for the beauty of the earth. Let us be glad that she is asking this of us. Let us be glad that we have a voice that can be used for such tremendous and good work. For what better action could be our heart than the renewal of the whole of the earth and all of its people? May it be so, and amen. Our chalice.
Please stand as you are willing in body, mind, or spirit, and join us in our actions as we extinguish the chalice. The words are in your order of service, and you're invited to say them out loud with me. We
extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, or the energy of action. We hold each other in our hearts until we meet again.
Please join in singing number 137 in the hardback hymnal. We utter our cry. Verses 1 and 2, please. Verse 3 with a change in the words, for children to come. We lift up our hearts for children to come. Give wisdom, O God, that we may hand on, replenished and tended this good planet Earth, preserving the future and wonder of birth.
Please remain standing for the benediction, and if you are comfortable holding hands, you may do so. Otherwise, just place your hand over your heart. This is a beautiful day, a day that we have been given to enjoy, to taste, to experience, and to celebrate. Let us be glad that we are in it and that we are in it together. Go forth and be a blessing upon each other and on the ground beneath your feet. Let us be seated and enjoy a beautiful postlude with our wonderful musicians. Thank you.
And again, this is in a foreign language, so I'll read the poem translation for you of ideal, which the you in this poem I kind of interpret to mean just the divine beloved. So, I followed you like a rainbow of peace along the paths of heaven. I followed you like a friendly torch in the veil of darkness, and I sensed you in the light, in the air, in the perfume of flowers, and the solitary room was full of you and of your radiance. Absorbed by you, I dreamed a long time of the sound of your voice, and earth's every anxiety, every torment I forgot in that dream. Come back, dear ideal, for an instant to smile at me again, and in your face will shine for me a new dawn.
Io ti seguì con miri di pace lungo le vie del cielo. Io ti seguì come un'amica face della notte nel velo. E ti sentii nella luce, nell'aria, nel profumo delle fiori. Evo piena la stanza solitaria di te, dei tuoi splendori. Interrapito al suon della tua voce, lungamente sognai, e della terra ogni affanno, ogni croce in quel giorno scordai. Torna, caro ideal, torna un istante a sorridemi ancora, e a me risplende